The bullet hit me before I heard the gun. I was on my knees on the wet concrete of Elmwood Avenue, a stranger's gray-haired head cradled in my lap, when the impact spun me sideways and a voice tore through the night air. "Don't move. Stay down. Don't you move." I was 17 years old. I had dialed 911 myself, and I was bleeding onto the pavement while the man I was trying to save looked up at me with fading, terrified eyes and whispered something I couldn't hear over the ringing in my ears. That was the night they took something from me. But they didn't get everything. And what happened next, what I did about it, that's the part they never expected. My name is Marcus Webb, and until that October, I was just a kid from the East Side who made his mother proud. I ran track, kept a 3.8 GPA, worked Saturday mornings at Mr. Haynes's hardware store on Delmar Street for $12 an hour and the satisfaction of knowing I'd earned every cent. Our apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that smelled faintly of pine sol, and somebody's always cooking collard greens. And I loved it. My mom, Denise Webb, worked nights at Mercy General as a floor nurse, which meant I spent a lot of evenings alone. But I didn't mind. I'd spread my homework across the kitchen table under the buzzing fluorescent light and let the neighborhood sounds drift up through the open window. Sirens, music, the rhythm of ordinary life. It felt safe. That was the word I would have used before. Safe. That Thursday evening I was walking home from track practice, the long way down Elmwood, because I liked the streetlights on that block. I had my earbuds in, Drake low in my right ear, backpack on, legs still warm from the workout. It was 6:47 p.m. exactly. I just checked my phone. The air smelled like asphalt cooling after a warm day and something fried from the bodega on the corner. And I was thinking about absolutely nothing important when I saw him. An older white man, maybe late 60s, in a business suit twisted wrong on his body, and he was going down. Not stumbling. Going down the way a tree goes, all at once, no warning. His briefcase hit the sidewalk half a second before he did. I had my earbuds out before I made a conscious decision to stop. I was beside him in 4 strides. Sir, can you hear me?" I crouched, turned him onto his back. His face was ashen, lips already edging toward blue, a sound coming out of him that wasn't breathing so much as struggling. I had my phone out and 911 dialed before his head was fully in my lap. "I need an ambulance. Man collapsed on Elmwood Avenue near Forest. I think it's cardiac. He's conscious, but barely." The dispatcher was steady, told me help was 4 minutes out. I kept one hand on his shoulder and felt his pulse at his wrist with my thumb, thin and stuttering. "You're okay," I told him, though I didn't know if that was true. "I got you. Help's coming. Stay with me, sir." I didn't hear the cruiser pull up. I was focused on Gerald's face, on his breathing, on the dispatcher's calm voice. The first thing I registered was a flashlight beam cutting across us, harsh, white, direct. Then the voice. Loud, hard, not like a question. Hey, step away from him, now." I looked up. The officer was out of the car, one hand raised, the light blinding me. I couldn't see his face, couldn't see anything but white light and shadow. I started to say something. "I called 911, I'm helping him." And I didn't finish the sentence before everything became noise and fire and the sidewalk. The bullet entered my left shoulder from the front. I know that now. I didn't know anything at the time, except that I was suddenly horizontal on the concrete, and there was a burning in my shoulder, so enormous it didn't feel real. I heard shouting. Someone said, "He moved, he was reaching." And someone else said, "He was on the phone." And my own voice, when it came, surprised me. "I called you," I said. It came out quiet, almost calm. "I'm the one who called you." Nobody answered. There were hands on me then, turning me, and the burning in my shoulder went from enormous to catastrophic. The concrete was cold against my cheek and smelled like rain and cigarette ash and old gum. And I pressed my face into it and thought of my mother's voice. The specific way she said my name when she was tired but happy. And I held on to that thought like a rope until the darkness came in from the edges and took everything else. I woke up in Mercy General. My mother was sitting beside the bed in her work scrubs, still wearing her nurse's badge from the shift she'd walked off of when she got the call. She was holding my right hand in both of hers and staring at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not fear exactly, not relief exactly. Something that lived between those two things and was harder than both of them. When she saw my eyes open, she didn't cry. She breathed out once, slow and deliberate, the way she breathed when she was keeping herself together. "Baby," she said, and her voice was steady and ruined at the same time. "Mom." My mouth tasted like metal and antiseptic. "How's Gerald?" She stared at me for a moment. Then something moved across her face that I couldn't name. "The man from the sidewalk? He's 3 floors up. He's going to be okay." She paused. "He's been asking about you." I closed my eyes. The fluorescent light left orange shapes on the inside of my eyelids. Good. That's good. Neither of us spoke for a while. The machines beeped, steady and indifferent, and the ordinary machinery of a hospital night went on around us. Then she said, very quietly, the way she said things she had been holding for a long time, "You didn't do anything wrong." I opened my eyes. "I know," I said. "I need you to hear me say it," she said. "I hear you, Mom." She nodded once. Her jaw was tight. She was still holding my hand, and there were things she wasn't saying. And I could feel the weight of all of them in the small distance between her face and mine. What I didn't know that night was that 2 things were already happening outside those walls. The first, Gerald Kaufman, 3 floors up, had already told a chaplain, a night nurse, and a patient liaison volunteer the same thing. The boy saved my life. He called 911. He didn't do anything but try to help me. The second, a woman named Brenda Okafor, who lived in the apartment building directly across from where Gerald had collapsed, had been standing at her kitchen window when the cruiser pulled up. She had a habit of watching the street in the evenings, and she'd had her phone in her hand. Deshaun came the first evening with jerk chicken from my favorite place on Hooper Street and sat on the end of the bed and was quiet for a long time, which was so unlike him that it told me more than anything he could have said. "They're saying he was reaching," he said finally, looking at the floor. "I know what they're saying." "Were you?" "I was on the phone with dispatch. They have the call recorded. 9 minutes and 43 seconds. He nodded slowly. "Brenda Okafor posted the video," he said. I had heard. One of the day nurses had mentioned it carefully, watching my face. 47 seconds of footage. A boy on his knees on wet pavement, a gray-haired man's head in his lap, a phone pressed to his ear. And then the flash. The video had been viewed, by the time Deshaun visited, just over 2 million times. But I still didn't know what was coming next. I didn't know about the police union statement that would drop the following morning, or the press conference, or the federal investigation, or the attorney who would call my mother's cell at 7 a.m. on my second day in that hospital bed. I didn't know yet that Gerald Kaufman was a retired federal judge with 4 adult children, 2 of whom were lawyers. I was just a kid in a hospital gown with a bullet wound, and my mother's hand in mine. And for one more night, the reckoning hadn't started. The police union statement came out at 8:14 a.m. My mother read it to me from her phone in that flat, careful voice she used when she was filtering something before it reached me. The same voice she'd used when she told me my grandfather had died. Officer Daniel Cruz, 12-year veteran, had responded to a call in a high-crime area and discharged his weapon when the suspect made a sudden movement consistent with reaching for a weapon. The statement used the word suspect 4 times in 6 sentences. I was the only person in that story who had been shot. My mother put the phone face down on the bedside table. The morning light came through the window blinds in thin slats and lay across the floor in pale strips. I thought about the 9 minutes and 43 seconds of recorded phone calls sitting in a 911 server somewhere. I thought about Brenda Okafor's 47 seconds of video. I thought about Gerald Kaufman 3 floors above us asking about me. And then I thought about the fact that none of that had stopped the union from using the word suspect. And something in my chest went very quiet and very cold. The way a room goes quiet when the last person who was arguing finally stops talking. Patricia Holm arrived at the hospital that afternoon in a gray coat and low heels. Carrying a leather folder, she sat on the edge of my bed without ceremony. She was a small, precise woman in her 50s, with close-cropped silver hair and the unhurried manner of someone who had been furious about things for a very long time and had learned to make that fury useful. She shook my right hand carefully and looked at me with clear, direct eyes. "I've watched the video 14 times, she said. "I've listened to the 911 call twice. I want to hear everything in your own words." So I told her, Mrs. Patterson and the Gatorade and the earbuds and 6:47 p.m. and the way Gerald had gone down like a tree. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a small, compressed handwriting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, without looking up from her folder, "Officer Cruz has 2 prior complaints of excessive force. Both were settled internally. Neither was made public." She let that sit in the room for a second. "The city is going to make this about the neighborhood, the hour, your clothing, your posture. They will say he made a reasonable judgment under pressure." She finally looked up. "We are going to show, methodically and publicly, that there was nothing reasonable about shooting a child who was on an active 911 call, with the dispatcher still on the line, kneeling over a cardiac patient." She closed the folder. "Are you with me?" I said yes. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Patricia filed the civil suit on day 5. The Department of Justice announced a civil rights inquiry on day 7. By then, the video had been seen 60 million times. Brenda Okafor had given 3 television interviews from her kitchen window, the same window she'd filmed from. And she was composed and precise every single time. Gerald Kaufman was discharged on day 6 and gave a statement from a wheelchair in the hospital lobby that a PR person had clearly tried to soften and that he had clearly refused to let them. "That young man saved my life," he said, in a voice still rough from the ventilator. "He called for help. He stayed with me. He did everything right. And he was shot for it." Officer Daniel Cruz was placed on administrative leave on day 4. I found out from Deshawn, who texted me a news link with no comment, just the link, which was somehow more satisfying than any message would have been. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something harder and more careful. The specific alertness of someone who knows the fight is still going and cannot afford to look away. The night before the federal hearing was the longest I'd spent since the hospital. I was home by then, shoulder in a sling, moving carefully around the apartment. My mother was at work. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd done 10,000 homework assignments, with a glass of water I didn't drink and the quiet around me. I thought about the word suspect. I thought about the concrete cold against my cheek and the smell of rain and old gum. I thought about Gerald going down like a tree, and about the 4 strides it had taken me to reach him, and about the fact that I would make those 4 strides again. Every single time. That was not bravery. That was just what I was. And they had shot me for it. I got up, washed my face with cold water, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long moment. The face looking back at me was not the same face that had walked down Elmwood Avenue on a Thursday evening with Drake in one ear. It was harder, more awake. I dried my face, went back to the table, and waited for morning. The federal hearing room smelled like old wood and recycled air. Patricia sat to my left. My mother sat in the gallery behind me, and I didn't have to look back to know exactly the expression on her face. Gerald Kaufman was there, in a suit now, and when I walked in, he caught my eye and gave me one slow nod that I felt in my sternum. Cruz sat across the room in his union rep's shadow, in plain clothes, looking at the table in front of him. The 911 call played in full. 9 minutes and 43 seconds of my own voice, steady and frightened and doing everything right, filling that room and bouncing off the old wood walls. I watched Cruz while it played. He didn't move. When the recording ended, the silence afterward was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my life. Then Patricia stood up. She placed on the table a single printed document, the internal affairs records of both prior excessive force complaints against Cruz obtained through discovery, never before made public. "We have the call," she said, in that unhurried voice. "We have the video. We have the victim's testimony, the bystander's testimony, and the testimony of the man whose life was saved. We also have this." She let her hand rest on the document for a moment. The question before this panel is not whether Officer Cruz made a mistake. The question is how many times a mistake has to repeat itself before it becomes a pattern. Cruz's union rep started to object. The panel chair told him to sit down. The consequences came in pieces. Cruz was terminated. The civil suit settled for an amount Patricia described as meaningful, in a tone that said she had fought for every dollar. The city announced a mandatory body camera policy, citing the case by name. 2 of the 3 officers at the scene that night submitted written statements corroborating the video and the call. Statements they had been discouraged from giving and had given anyway. Gerald Kaufman called me on a Tuesday afternoon about 2 months later. I was at the kitchen table doing AP calculus, the window open, the neighborhood sounds coming up from below. "Marcus," he said, in that graveled voice, "I want you to know something." "Yes, sir." "I've been a judge for 31 years, he said. "I've watched a lot of people make decisions under pressure. Most of them I've forgotten." A pause. "I won't forget you." I didn't know what to say, so I said thank you. And he said you're welcome. And we stayed on the line a few seconds in a comfortable silence that felt like something being set down gently. The night the settlement was finalized, my mother made real dinner. Collard greens that had simmered since morning, cornbread out of the oven at just the right moment. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table under the buzzing fluorescent light, the same table. She poured sweet tea into 2 glasses and pushed one toward me. "You okay?" she said. I actually thought about it, the way the question deserved. "Yeah," I said. "I think I actually am." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her glass. I picked up mine. The sweet tea was cold and clean and tasted like nothing complicated. Outside, below the window, the neighborhood sounded exactly the way it always had. Sirens, music, the rhythm of ordinary life. Safe. That was still the word. But now I knew what it cost and who paid for it, and I was done pretending otherwise.